We'll do a review of Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Yud Zayin. We'll do the Perek Sheni in Pirkei Avos, in the back of Lekutei Sichos Chelek Yud Zayin, the second Perek in the Pirkei Avos. The Rebbe explains it a Mishnah, and as usual, the Rebbe wants to know why is this Mishnah from the Milah de Chasidusa? Why is it words of righteousness? Seems to be some basic halachas and basic needs that a yid has to do. Why do we call them? Why are they included in the Pirkei Avos? This is a very interesting. The Rebbe discusses Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel and his level, and the author of this Mishnah, and the Rebbe will explain about Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, about the various different things that weren't mevatel to the Shema and the Tefillah. See lot of different interesting details explaining this Perek. So let's look inside. Perek Sheni Aleph. So Rabbi Shimon says, Havei zohir b'kriyas Shema u'b'tefillah. He says one needs to be careful with the Shema, with reading the Shema, and with the davening. And of course, the first question Rabbi is going to ask is, reading the Shema and davening is a mitzvah of the Torah. Why is Rabbi Shimon saying Havei zohir b'kriyas Shema u'b'tefillah? And the Rebbe is going to explain that Rabbi Shimon was of the level of Terosim U'Manosim, who don't necessarily mevatel this man. Let's wait inside. Ukshato mispalel, the second statement that Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel says, even though it says Rabbi Shimon, but the Rebbe proves the Oris, and later on, this is a hemshech to Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel mentioned Haim, each one said three things. So this is Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel. So Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel, further, what does he say? Ukshato mispalel, when you daven, al taz tefiloscha kva el rachamim v'tachanunim lifnei hamokim. Don't make your davening as set. Say the words just as is. Plead before Hashem. El rachamim. Ask God for compassion. Tachanunim, beseech, beg Hashem. Lifnei hamokim, before Hashem. And then it says further, Ba'al Tirasha. The third thing he says, Ba'al Tirasha b'fnei atzmecha. Don't feel yourself a Rasha before yourself. This last statement the Rebbe will explain towards the end of the Sikha. The most of the Sikha is going to concentrate on these two earlier statements of Rabbi Shimon, Havei zohir b'kriyas Shema b'tefillah, and Kshato mispalel al taz tefiloscha kva. Darf man verstehen. So we need to have to understand. Aleph number one, darf man then onkumet tzatziva b'sechta Avos? Do we then need to come on to an instruction in tractate Avos, which is milsa da chasidusa, the matters that deal with righteousness above the letter of the law? And one needs to be careful in a mitzvah deraisa, in a positive mitzvah of the Torah, which is the Shema. Or the afilu mitzvah derabbanan. Do we need a command that it says the Rabbanon, whether the tefillah, the order nusach tefillah, which is midrabanon, do we then need that? So why is the Braisa saying it? It brings down the Deis mitzvah, the Rabbanon, the various different sources for that. But in either event, why do we need a special instruction in Milsa de Chasidusa that one needs to be careful of? Especially on Achas Kam V'Kama di Tzvei mitzvahs. Especially we talk about these two mitzvahs, Kriyas Shema and Tefillah. But the mitzvahs, Ikriyas and Klolis, they are main mitzvahs, and they're general mitzvahs in Avodas Hashem, Hashem. Why would they even need the Milsa Chazuz to tell you they have to be careful with reading the Shema and with the davening? And similar, we have a problem with the second sentence, second statement. Al derech zein der zweiter Baba, the second case. It says, when you daven, don't make your prayer as set, but make it compassion, mercy, and begging before Hashem. Was is in them the Reifta, the Mishnah Mefareshes? What is the novelty on what is already a very clear Mishnah? Mesachta Brachas. It says, and tefillah If you make your prayer permanent, you make it rote just to say, then it's not a level of begging Hashem. So we see that tefillah has to be in a way of tarachim tachnun. And number three, the third part of the Mishnah, what's the connection of the third instruction? What does it mean? Don't hold yourself for a rasha. We're talking about a person who is on a level that he thinks is a rasha, and then it'll cause him to give up. So, what's the connection to what we were talking about before? Was it the shach the dritter about the rasha from atzmecha? Don't be a rasha in front of yourself. One shouldn't hold himself for a rasha. The reason is that would bring a person to give up a hope. Thinks I'm a rasha, so forget it, and he will not do tshuva. And that therefore he won't stop. Also, hold back from doing another aveda because I'm a rasha anyways. He won't do tshuva. He won't stop from another aveda. So what's the connection to that, to the tzvei dikeros, to the two previous instruction, where there's hiris and krishma and tefillah, about being careful in the Shema and tefillah? Like I mentioned, the Rebbe first is going to explain at length throughout the Sikha the first two instructions, and then at the end, the Rebbe is going to come back to this following the last instruction. So the Rebbe says that we have to understand the author of the Mishnah, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel, who, as the Rebbe is going to prove this, who is the one who studied mainly Torah, and we know Terosum and Monosum did not have to interrupt for davening and learning, and that's why he's saying, still have a Zohir. Let's look inside. In their Mishnah, the point of the explanation of the Mishnah is the Drayeros in their Mishnah. These three instructions, this Mishnah is eine verbunden der mit. They are connected with the fact was their Baal Hamayim, Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel, the author of this statement, Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel. The Rebbe will prove later in the Pnim, and the Rebbe here in the Goa deals in the Haora deals with it. But the Rebbe, it's obvious that this Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon Esanel, even though usually Rabbi Shimon's stam is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But here, because it follows the previous mention of Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel, they would say, so it's obvious that it's Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel over here in this case. But in any event, the Rebbe said this is tied to Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel, is by him given Terosum Umnosum. By him it was Terosum Umnosum, which means that his Torah was his craft. And that was on a very strong level. That was bidugmas that was similar to the level of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Bidugma of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is similar to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Lekama Sivches, as we'll see later on Sivches. And therefore, when there was Terosu Umnosoi, a person whose Torah is his craft, is not mafsik and limit Torah to Kriya Shema, is not interrupt his study of Torah to reading the Shema. Rashbi zokt in Yerushalmi. Rashbi says in Yerushalmi, he says Kigoin Onu, as we includes Rabbi Shimon Yechoy, Rabbi Shimon Esanel, the people at the level of Terosum Monosei, Shoyski Betalmud Torah, that we are occupied in the study of Torah. Afilu Likriya Shema Ein Onu Mafsikim. We don't even interrupt for reading the Shema. And we'll see later on a lot of explanation about why and who in great details. But we still see that Rabbi Shimon Yechoy is saying that we who learn Torah, Terosum and Osa don't interrupt for Kriya Shema. Unalachas kama v'kamon, and for sure it's Kriya Shema is a mitzvah Torah. And how much more so as it is the mafsik, the tefillah, that he doesn't interrupt for davening. With the psak din, as the ruling is, as Terosum and Osa, ein mafsikin l'tefillah. If Torah is his craft, then we don't interrupt for the davening. So see himself, because it was Terosum Nosa, he did not interrupt for reading the Shema and the davening. So he needed to caution seine Talmidim, his students. As then the that they'll see the conduct of the Rebbe, that he doesn't do the Kriya Shema and Tefillah. So Bazei leave them it ver nachalish in the mitzvahs Krishma Tefillah. So because of this, it will weaken by them the mitzvah of reading the Shema and davening. So that's the first thing he has to tell them, because he himself did actually not read Shema and Tefillah because he was Terosim Manosei. But he needed a caution, but don't. That's me, I'm the exception. And then he gives to them another instruction for his friends. Notwithstanding the fact that they have to daven, maybe they're going to think the daven is going to be like quickly. So he gives another instruction. Is given, which means not for his students. The first one was for the students, so they don't make a mistake. Even those who don't daven normally, but when they do daven, they have to make it in the way of kavod. The Noach Zokter Zweite Roh for his colleagues. Is given to also by them, the Torah was their craft. Nor nit in sein Darge, but they weren't at his level. Und der Riber darfen sie, mafsik sein. They need to interrupt for Shema. Bedugma zu Chavrei Rashbik Lekama Siv Gimel, as we will say later on, the friends of Rav Shimon Yochai. So, not everybody who's Terosim or Manosim is not supposed to daven or read the Shema. That's a special category within Terosim and Manosim. His Chaverim, so his Chaverim, who did interrupt, he's giving them an instruction. Oich Bazei is given Terosim Manosim. Is to tell them, Kshata Mispalel, Altas, Tfilos Chekivah, El Rach Mitachnunim Chulu. So when you daven, don't daven in a way of making your Torah kavah, but Rach Mitachnunim. Emes Take as ein Mafsikin Litfilo. Let it be true that you don't interrupt for davening those who are. So in other words, for davening, for Kriya Shema, they are mafsik because there's a chelek between the Shema and the Tefillah. Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel himself, the Rebbe will explain in his Gimel, those who are at the full level of Terosim and Manosim, they didn't mafsik for anything, not for Krishma, not for Tefillah. Those who are on the lower level, they're not 100% Kriya, Terosim Manosim, like the Chaverim of Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel or the Chaverim of Shimon Yochai. So they go like it says in Shulchan Aruch, for Tefillah ein mafsikin l'Tefillah, the Rebbe quoted earlier. But for Kriya Shema, they were mafsik. So he's telling them, but for Tefillah, even though you're not mafsik, you're mafsik for Shema, but you are not mafsik for Tefillah. So he's telling them, Ksha'atom mispalel, that you don't interrupt for the daven. When you do daven, in the Zeiten when you are davening, kiyudua, as divos bazei is terosim umnosim, that even those with terosim umnosim, we said they don't have to interrupt for davening. They also daven from time to time. So the tefillah needs ein and eifur kavah. So the tefillah should not be in a way that it's a keva. Abishas Maise, in other words, it's a burden on him. It's a keva. Abishas Maise trachte is thinking, Mosai Efrik Malayilze, when will I take off of myself, unload from myself this yoke of having to daven now? So he says, no, don't make it keva. He has in mind, he says, when can I unload? I go back to the Torah. He's telling him when you daven in a way of beseeching and asking for mercy. The third error, not to be a Rasha, is verbunden mit Meiles Reb Shimon ben Esanel. This also is connected to the greatness of Rav Shimon ben Esanel. Was Terosum and Osik in Lakamas of you, this will be addressed later on. So the Rebbe explained that Kriya Shema, Kriya Shema. So the Rebbe said, why did he say it? Because since he didn't do Shema himself, it doesn't only say, not only didn't he say the Mizor B'Tfilah, he told him Shema. So that means that he didn't say Shema himself. This idea that Rosim and Manosim is exempt from Shema seems to be only the opinion of the Yerushalmi. But according to Babli, it seems like you do have to interrupt for the Shema. So how are we going to explain Havi Zohir as if this is not a Chiyuv? And the Rebbe explains that's actually not a Machlokes. Let's look inside. Gimel. If we anal in Havi Zohir B'Kriyas Shema, so we explained before that why does he say Kriyas Shema also? So Tefillah we understand why he didn't daven, because that's the halacha in the Babli, that's halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. But we also said that Rav Shimon Esanel said the Havi Zohir B'Kriyas Shema. That means that even Krishma you don't have to say. Is in Havi Zohir B'Kriyas Shema Kamel Chayr Fragen, so we can ask the day of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, this opinion of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, as lekrishma inon mafsikim, that we don't have to interrupt for the Shema, bringt sich nor in Yerushalmi. This is only brought down in the Yerushalmi. Aber ledas hababli, nazoy oich is the halacha, nazoy is echt the halacha. Zan oich divas terosim u'monosim. Even those who terosim u'monosim, afilu kirin rashbi v'chavedo, mafsikim l'kriyas Shema. They also have to be mafsik. Rashbi v'chavedo have to be mafsik for the Shema. So the Rebbe explains here now that there is two differences actually in Terosim and Monosim. There is those who are like Mamish, like Rashbi, and that is, even the Babli will agree to the somebody who's Terosim and Monosim at that level. And then there is Chavedav of Rashbi, which are also Terosim and Monosim. And that's when the halacha is that the Babli says that you have to read the Shema. It's talking about one who's not mamish on the highest level like Rav Shimon. Let's look inside. Is dasboring them. So how to explain this? Loitum klal, based on the principle as mendarf mashvizayin Babli v'Yerushalmi kol modef. So we need to try to reconcile to the much as possible to fit in the view of the Babli Yerushalmi. Even if you have to interpret something which is not so comfortable, it's a little quetched, a little squeezed, but you still say it in order to fit it. The Rebbe is trying to straighten out the Babli Yerushalmi that there's no real machlokes. So is mistaber zu sagen, so therefore it's logical to conclude as euch do is nit kein plukta, that also over here there is no argument between Babli and Yerushalmi, between the Babli and Yerushalmi. Nor as zachilik zwischen Rashbi alein chavedim. The difference is actually on Rav Shimon Yochai himself and his colleagues. Der Tam for Avos Rashbi halt as medaf nish mafzayin lekrishma as brought down in the Yerushalmi. That why does Rav Shimon Yochai of the opinion that you don't need to interrupt for Shema is val zeh shinun, because zeh Talmud Torah, learning is shinun. We don't negate one learning for the other learning. So basically, if you're learning already Terosim Nosu, you're not going to do the Shema. We're not going to take one there. As the Yerushalmi concludes, continues, according to one answer, Reb Shimon ben Yochi al Yidei Shehoya Chodid v'Divrei Torah. Reb Shimon ben Yochi, since he was sharp in the words of Torah, Lefikoch Eino Chaviva Olov, so therefore it's not as dear to him, the reading of Shema, Yosem v'Divrei Torah, more than learning Torah. So basically, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was in a level that the learning and the sharpness of the Torah that he had was not to be pushed away by the Kriya Shema, which was not as Chavivah. So based on this, we can say, as Dafke Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Alein, it was only Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai himself who did not interrupt for the Shema. Kediyu Kaloshin, as the emphasis of the language, this precise language, is Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai al Yidei Shoyu Chodid b'divrei Torah. So the Yerushalmi says that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai specifically, because he was Chodid b'divrei Torah. Eina Chaviva olav chulu. So on him, we're talking about a singular person. Mashenken Chavaraya delay, as opposed to his the group, other Terasim Nasoham, yeah, Mafsigim and Krishma. They did interrupt for Krishma. And the Rebbe says, even by Rav Shimon Yochai, we could say there were two periods. There was the period before the Maira, before the cave. Then even he would interrupt. Could have been at the time at the level to Rasim and also before, but he was still interrupt. And after the Maira, he didn't. Yes, Lemar, we can say, but within Rav Shimon Yochai himself, as he's given a chiluk, it made a difference. Either it is given in Maira before he had to escape and be in the cave for 12, 13 years, und dem Zman noch seiner Rizgin, and the time after he went out. And we're saying, this that he did not interrupt for the Shema, that only began after he left the cave. At that time, he accomplished the true elevation, the true sharpness in the study of Torah. The Gemara itself in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos relates over there that after the cave, in the beginning, he would ask Pinchas ben Yair and Rav Shimon ben Yochai. First, he would ask him the questions, and now he was the one that gave the answer. So we see that he grew in Torah. The Gemara in Shabbos, so that you can see Shimon ben Yochai grew at a much higher level in Torah after the cave. Rebbe is suggesting maybe at that point he reached that higher level. Uniqueness of Chodit, what the Yerushalmi is talking about, is at that level. But maybe before he reached that higher level, Hitake would also have to interrupt for the Shema, even according to the Babli. So V'yesh Loimar, as Rav Shimon Nesano is given the Dugma to Rav Shimon Yochai. So Rav Shimon Nesano was in a similar way. He reached that level that he himself did not be mafsik to Torah. That is given Lachari Tzos Ben Amayra, as Rav Shimon Yochai was after going out of the cave. As we'll see later on. The Rebbe will bring a story of the Gemara Chagiga, in which we see Rav Shimon ben Yochai, he started to do Darshan Ma'is Merkava. There was a rainbow. The Rebbe will bring out a tremendous greatness what took place with Rav Shimon ben Yochai. That's why he did not interrupt for Shema. So the Rebbe basically established over here. The Rebbe answered the Chetchila. Why is he telling you have to be careful with Shema and davening? Because Rav Shimon ben Yochai himself did not read the Shema, did not read, didn't do the davening. And the Rebbe challenged there. It doesn't seem like even Terasim and Manasim, according to the Bavli. That's in Yerushalmi. But it doesn't seem that according to the Bavli, one who has Terasim and Manasim still should interrupt with the Shema. So the Rebbe's whole biur that Rav Shimon ben Yochai didn't read Shema seems like it doesn't fit according to the Bavli, which the halacha is that even Terasim and Manasim should be mafsik for the Shema. And the Rebbe explained we don't have to make a machlokes in Bavli and Yerushalmi. But we have to say there's two categories in Terasim and Manasim. It's Rav Shbi, who's a special category. Also within Rav Shbi, after he came out of the cave. And we're going to say that Rav Shimon ben Yochai was unique. He reached the level of Rav Shimon ben Yochai as he was after the cave. And that's why Rav Shimon ben Yochai actually did not read Shema. And therefore he had to tell his students, have a Zorbi Kriya Shema with Tefillah, because he didn't do neither Krishma, neither Tefillah, because he wasn't at a higher level. And the Rebbe is going to bring around first to prove that this is Rav Shimon ben Yochai. And the Rebbe is going to say that his instructions over here have to do with the high level of Rav Shimon ben Asano. Let's look inside Dalit. Other Inyan. So this idea, as by Rav Shimon ben Asano, is given to Teroso Umnosoi, that by him it was Teroso, it was his craft. Wie Rav Shimon bar Yochai, as it was by Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Und das ist die Nekuda Atichoyne for the drei Heroes of the Mishnah, and this is the central point of the three lessons of the Mishnah, as the Rebbe explained before. Also, we call him here Rav Shimon, even though it's Rav Shimon Asano. Why would the Mishnah to hint to you that this is Rav Shimon? Rav Shimon, we're talking about the level of Teros and Nasr. These manumas in them, this is hinted in this, but the Mesader Mishnah, the Mondonit, the one who organized Mishnah, doesn't mention Shem Aviv from Balamaimer. He doesn't say his father's name. Shimon ben Asano was that full name Kirogel. His full name, as the Tana is normally writes when we talk about Shimon ben Asano, we put the name Shimon ben Asano. He just says Reb Shimon Eimer. That's very easily made a mistake because Reb Shimon Stam is Reb Shimon Reichoi. The place of Shimon Stam. But Stam Reb Shimon is got Reb Shimon Reichoi. He just writes Reb Shimon Stam. How come he did that? Well, the reason the Mishnah doesn't have to state it because it follows the previous Mishnah which quoted Reb Shimon Asano, so we know that it follows. But still, there's a reason that the hint something that this is talking about Reb Shimon Asano because he had the Maila of Reb Shimon Eichel Terosem Nos. Even though, very simply, the Mishnah does not need to articulate and translate it specifically because this Mishnah it comes as a follow-up to the previous Mishnahs from them paid to this chapter. Over there, it enumerates the Chamisha Talmidim, the 5 students from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The 5 students of Yochanan ben Zakkai, und zwischen sie, amongst the 5 students was Reb Shimon ben Asano. Und noch steht, and after that it says, hey, these 5 students, they said 3 things. As jeder von sie hat gesagt 3 Sachen, each one of them said 3 things. Is doch me'elach move on, so it's understood by itself as mit Reb Shimon Omer, that with Reb Shimon Omer, who is this Reb Shimon? Wer do gemeint? Reb Shimon ben Asano. That who do we mean here? We mean Reb Shimon ben Asano. Because it follows Reb Shimon Asano that was mentioned earlier. So, why are we making a big deal of that it says here Reb Shimon, not Stam? But yet, since every aspect of Torah is exact, totally exact, especially it's not in the same Mishnah, but it's a separate Mishnah, and which is Kama Mishnah is weiter von Nordus for the and it's several Mishnahs further away than the spot where you see very clearly his name and name of his father, Shemazano. So it's still not right there. So there could be some room to make a mistake. For them must learn blows the Mishnah. Of course, he's learning just this Mishnah. He's not learning the previous Mishnah. It says Reb Shimon. He'll make a mistake. He'll say, guys, they're malamayim Reb Shimon Yochai. He may think it's Shimon Yochai. So why does we do that? So it's verstandig now trying to hint to you something. As mitzad, them tam pnimi in the Eiros for Reb Shimon ben Asano, that because of the inner reasoning, the reasoning why Reb Shimon ben Asano gives these instructions is negeya. Here it's important to know, nid dos vaser is Reb Shimon ben Asano. Here we don't want to, it's not important Reb Shimon ben Asano, nor dos vaser is Reb Shimon Stam. Here it's important because he's just Reb Shimon. Ein inyan mit Reb Shimon bar Yochai, that he's really one of the same Shimon bar Yochai. Basically, Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon have, and the fact they have the same name, have a common ground because Reb Shimon has that level. Why they reach that level of Terosum Nos? The Rebbe explains now when I say, Das Bora Bazar. What's the explanation? The Tam Pnimi was Tam Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon bar Yochai. What is the inner reason? Why Take? When we say Shimon, listen, hear Reb Shimon Yochai. But the name Shimon is from Loshe Shmiya. The name Shimon comes from Loshe of listening. Was a mitis a toich of Shmiya to listen. What is the real content? When you listen, is a one of us to understand and grasp. Und der Inyan von Teirosum when we talk about a person whose crafts is Torah, was the Rid vereint sich mit Torah, which the Yid unites with Torah, diese wird in sein ganze Umonus, that becomes his entire crafts. Kum davke when by ihm is the Haskola verstanden Torah B'Shlemus. This only comes to by the persons when his understanding in Torah is wholesome. When a person really understands Torah fully, then is the meaning that he really hears it. He hears the Torah. In Torah B'Shlemus. Was demol verter vereinzigt mit Torah. Then he becomes united with Torah. With a wondrous union. There's no other union like that. To become one and united, actually from every side and every corner. So Reb Shimon Stam is Reb Shimon Vayechoi, because who is a Shimon? Who is a listener? Who is united with Hashem? That's Reb Shimon, one who listens. From this we also understand it as far as every all. But some that have the same name. It's known as the Shemus von Ha'idin, that the name of a Jew, from the Tanoim Gemer, especially when we talk about the Tanoim, they present the content, the point, the main idea from Zeir Aveda from their service. As Bazei is do behelma kol ponim amein from Stam Reb Shimon, that they have at least some sort of the Stam Reb Shimon. So therefore, when the pasuk says over here, the level of Torah, we know Reb Shimon, without saying who the Reb Shimon is, we're talking about this Reb Shimon, the general, the level of Torah Sumanosei, which is the inner reason for Havizor B'Krishma Tefillah and Kshata Mispal. And the fact is the Mishnah Madayik to Zogan Dor Reb Shimon Stam. That's why the Mishnah is precisely exactly using the words of Shimon Stam, not Reb Shimon Sanel. As those was Reb Shimon Sanel Gizog Di Heroes. Why did Reb Shimon Sanel give these instructions? These lessons is as mitzadem basarot is the mile for Reb Shimon Stam. It's because he has within himself that elevation of Shimon Stam, Reb Shimon B'Yechoi, which is Terasa M'Manosa, which is Terasa, his crafts. Now the Rebbe explains now what does Terasa M'Manosa really mean. It could mean quantity-wise, but it could also mean quality-wise. Quantity-wise means you're always learning Torah, not wasting any time for anything else. But it could also mean a higher level in quality. Vov. The gather from Terosei Umnosei, the definition, what is Terosei Umnosei? In Pashtus is Aleph, number one. This is Inyan Zman. This is something time-wise. Learn Torah on Oifer. He learns Torah without stop. And he's not masik to look and he doesn't interrupt for nothing. Base. Number two. Even this also would be when you're learning the revealed part of Torah. Find Barashbi himself. That as so you don't have to learn the higher level of Torah that I was going to bring out, but Kabbalah is really the quality also, as mentioned. That here you also is when you're learning the revealed part of Torah. As we find with Shimei himself. As a feeling ma'ora is ikar oiske given in Teres HaMishnayos. The main occupation was in the learning of the Mishnayos. Unit Sefer HaZohar v'Tikunim, but not in the Sefer Zohar and the Tikunim. In other words, now wasn't the Kabbalah. So while that's possible, steht aber in Zohar, but in the Zohar it says, as miterosum umnosum meintman, this was loizoza shchina minheim kol yimei. Means from those that the divine has not separated from them all their days. Terosum nosim means the shchina was with them. Und sie seinen dira lishchinta, and they are a dwelling place. They're a place where the divine resides. Was davon ist verstandig. So from this we understand, Aleph, that Ilu von Teros und Nose besteht, the advantage of Teros and Nose consists in their Eichos dike Zukunft, the quality of their connection to Torah. As ein ganze Metzies is durchgenommen mit Torah, that his entire being is penetrated, is taken through with Torah. And kol inyono is nor, and only what he is what said is adira l'shchinta. He becomes a dwelling place for the divine resting in him. Number 2, od die Zugebundenkeit is nicht nur zu Chochmas HaTorah. This connection is not just to the wisdom of Torah, nor be iker zum Neusen HaTorah. It's a connection to the one who gave us the Torah, which is the Shechita, the divine. Bosazal limud. So such a study is verbunden dafke bepnimis HaTorah, with the inner part of Torah. Wie steht befehlish in the Tikkunei Zohar, as it says very clearly in the Tikkunei Zohar, as dafke morei Kabbalah Abdullah to the Shechina Dira, that it was dafke those masters of the Kabbalah, of the esoteric, they are the ones that make a Dira for the Shechina. So basically what the Rebbe wants to prove from this, that this Terosum Nose is actually also relates very closely with the idea of the Pnimis HaTorah. This is Yisoid from them. This is also the basis for them was Chassidus is Mevayer in the Minyan for Terosum Nose. Explains the concept of Terosum Nose as the Limud HaTorah is in an oifen that you learn Torah in such a way from Va'osim Dvarei B'ficha. I put my words in your mouth. So in other words, you're just a vehicle to give the words of Hashem. The Divrei Torah was the Loimed Zok Tarosh and Zayin Moil, the words of Torah that the one who studies, expresses through his mouth. They are related to Hashem. It's Dvorai, my words in your. Zok noch the Divrei Torah. He's sort of repeating the words of Torah, but the Eibshter Kaviyachol Zok, which Hashem, so to speak, is saying. That comes from the total subjugation to the one who gave the Torah. You become a dwelling place for the divine. So, move on. So now we understand. As those was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is given to Rosh Nosei. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was at the level to Rosh Nosei. He says, verbunden mit them was that is given from the Morei Kabbalah. That's connected to the fact that it was the masters of Kabbalah. The Adrab, on the contrary, is given, there was Mashpia given. He was the one that was Mashpia Primus HaTorah Tzandra Tanoim, to the other Tanoim. Was the far, and therefore he's given in the Darga Chinailis to Rosh Nosei. That's why he was at the highest level within Teros Nosei itself. So now the Rebbe laid the ground to explain why Take, one who's Teros Nosei, doesn't have to read the Shema. Based on, we just explained that Teros Nosei has the Shekhinah, divine part of the of that person, so he basically doesn't need the Shema to reach that level. Zayin, der midvet men euch atoyses biur, haben atoyses biur. This will give an additional explanation in them was Rab Shimon Bar Yochai davke It specifically, Rav Shimon Yochai nit mafsik even l'kriyas Shema. He did not interrupt for the Shema. While others, as the Rebbe said, did. This applied to Rav Shimon Yochai uniquely. K'dei as the limud ha'Torah zol zayin in an eifun from ba'osim dvarai b'ficha. In order for the Torah to be in a way that you should be subjugated so that Hashem's words should come through your minds, Kiniska le'il, as mentioned earlier, Muzman frier stein in abitl betachlis tzelekus. So first you need to stand at a level of totally subjugation to godliness. Und das wird aufgetan durch der Avodah von Kriyas Shema. That's accomplished through the service of Shema. Was in Yon is Mesiras Nefesh. Shema is Mesiras Nefesh. That's what you accomplish when you do the Shema. Rashbi Ober, on the other hand, especially after he was in the cave, he was constantly in a state of total subjugation to godliness. He himself expressed it. He says, I'm just a sign, like no entity. I'm just a sign for something else. No mitzias. I'm just showing a simon for something, for godliness. He is of no entity on his own. His entire entity, being, is only was there is a sign of Getlichkeit. He was just a sign for godliness. It is given a dir l'shchinto betachlis. He was a total dwelling place where the divine rested. Was the first state of him. That's why, with regards to the Shimon Yochai, it says, "Man pnei odin havaya." He says, "Go see the pnei, the master Hashem." Who's the master Hashem? Instead of Shimon Yochai, a human being, because he was no existence to himself. All what he was a simon. He was a dir l'shchinto. And the far had nit gedarft haben the Agdoma from Kriyas Shema, and that's why he did not need the introduction of Shema. Zayin limud ha'Torah zol zayin an eifim b'Torah nosei. That his Torah should be in a way of Torah nosei, which means to reach the level of osim dvarai b'ficha, which is the level of Torah nosei. He didn't leave it because that was his essence mitzias. That's not a level we can say for the rest of the Chabraya. That's not the level we can say for the rest of the Chabraya. As the Rebbe will continue now and say, well, Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel actually was in that level versus the all other ones. So the Gemara brings down now a Gemara, Isches, it's very detailed. In Gemara, in Chagiga, it relates as Rabbi Lazar, Yidal ben Beis, is Rabbi Lazar ben Aroch, had gebeten Rishus by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He asked permission by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Iber zu sagen for him, to repeat to him one item that he taught him in Maisa Merkava, in the act of Merkava. After he expounded, is Yorda Ishmar Hashemayim Chulu. There was a fire descended from the heavens. So that happened with Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, one of the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Und dann ist der noch, the Gemara is Mavsha, as when Rabbi Yossi HaKoyen and Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel, they witnessed, there was the other from the 5 students, of them gehert, they heard about the story. So they also started in the act of Merkava. They didn't give over what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that he has, but they started talking about the act of Merkava. Our sages tell us what happened when they started talking. There was the first day of the season of Tammuz, the heat. No usually rain then, no clouds. And the earth was noisy, and the bow was visible in the cloud. The Yotza Baskal of Amram Chulun, there's a Baskal came out and said about the secrets that they are revealing. This story of the Gemara the Rebbe is using to show the special quality of Shimon ben Esano, even versus Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch and Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, and which puts him in a similar madrega as Rabbi Shimon Yochai. So what does the Rebbe say? Zetman from them. What do we see? Rabbi Shimon ben Esano is given from the Mora Kabbalah. Rabbi Shimon ben Esano was from the master of the Kabbalah. Unen Eifun, and to such an extent, as in Reden und Meise Merkava, that his discussion in the act of Merkava, but Oivgiton, it accomplished as Rosh Oretz, that the earth was noise. The Yotze Baskel V'Amrechul, and the voice came out and said, which means, as what Mamshech given the Shechin Lamato, he can bring out the baskel, he can bring it out below. From them is verstandig as is given dir l'shchinta. That means from this we can understand that he was a dir l'shchinta. So one can say, well, there was other Tanoim there, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. They also did Ma'aseh Merkava, they also was the Rash or the Baskel was Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. Also, why are we pitting and saying specifically about Shimon ben Esano? The Rebbe brings out now and see that Shimon ben Esano is unique. That he darshaned, he didn't give over other ones, that he's not a Kohen which has skusavas. Let's see. Zwischen the Oiber the Monte Tanoim Bufa, amongst the Tanoim itself, is Doa Iluyun of Shimon ben Esano. There is an advantage to Rav Shimon ben Esano. Because the Fari is Erdavke Bedugma to Rav Shpi. That's why he specifically is like Rav Shpi, who is not mafsik to Kriya Shema. And he's Vertongru from Shimon. And we call him Shimon in the Brisa like Shimon Stam. Kiniska Leil Siv Gimel, I said before, that's what the Mishnah calls him, because it's really the quality of Rav Shimon, Lishon of Shema, and the level of Bittul. What is the difference? Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch had not Iber gesagt. He only repeated, something which Rabbi Chaim Wolosow taught him, Limad Tani, he taught it to me. So he didn't come up with it. And then amongst Rabbi Yossi HaKohen and Rav Shimon ben Esano, between the two of them, they expounded Ma'aseh Merkava in a way from Poschu. They didn't repeat what Rabbi Chaim Wolosow said, but they opened up B'koyach Atzmim with their own power. Ubefrat, al derech hayidua, it was a known idea in the Pirush from Pasach Reb Shimon, when it says Reb Shimon opened up a Yitzibay, das meant, didn't mean just he started to say, but this is that you have an ayin in your mitzvah that he opened up a new concept and a new pipeline. Is do an ilu Reb Shimon ben Esano of Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. So they both did it. Paschu, this two of them together, but yet there is an advantage of Shimon ben Esano on Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. Kuhuna, the Zugegreitkeit, the priesthood, that they had Lamed L'Shoros of Bnei Hashem, according to stand the Surah for Hashem, which is Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. So the Kuhuna, Bakum B'Noch B'Yerusha. So that you get as an inheritance. The Ripper is Oich Zayin Pesach B'Ma'aseh Merkava. When he opened up B'Ma'aseh Merkava, Nit Gorin Gans Na'yif Pesach B'Keich Atzmei. That's not he opened up. It wasn't entirely his own strength, because he's a Kohen, so he has something that he gets as an inheritor. The Shleimus Diker Bavais, as when he's Dire Lishchinta. When do we have the complete evidence that you're a dwelling place for the divine? As the ganze Metzias for mention is Meyuchad Mitschinta, that the entire being of the person is united with the Shchinta, is when the Psicha B'Ma'aseh HaMerkava, is when you open up and you talk Ma'aseh Merkava, in an Eufen was poilt, and in such an extent that it impacts Rosh HaOretz B'chulu, kommt in Ganzen von sein eigenem Koyach, when it comes totally on your own powers. Und das gefällt man dafke bei Reb Shimon ben Esano. We find this in Shimon ben Esano. wasn't a kohen. He didn't have any power. It was very nit angerufen a kohen. He's not. We're not calling him like a Rabbi Yossi HaKohen the kohen. And he's not even a kohen. He wasn't a kohen. That's again. Yet, but the Pasir given Ma'aser Merkava for now. He opened up Ma'aser Merkava. That shows on a real level of the Terasa and Marasa, because that you're a Dira L'Shchinta, you become a dwelling of the Shchinta. And the Rebbe brings out now the other thing is that you have to understand this whole idea. So between Rabbi Loza ben Aroch repeating, there was no keshes over there. And here the Gemara says, but Rabbi Yitzchak Kohen and Rabbi Shimon Asanel, his Rabbi Shimon Asanel created this keshes. Rebbe is going to explain now the whole union of the keshes. What is the keshes? Keshes seems to be like a negative. Because we say that when the keshes, the doirei or Shiva didn't have a keshes because it reminds the mabul, so it reminds that there's chus. So why is we talking about the keshes? We'll explain that. But the bottom line is the Rebbe wants to point out that there is still a greater impact that took place from the drasha that Rav Shimon and Sanel together Rabbi Yisrael Kohen, but Rabbi Yisrael Kohen had the Kohen part. But the drasha of Rav Shimon and Sanel impacted more than the drasha of Rabbi Loza ben Aroch. Test that Ili for Rav Shimon ben Nasanel's Deirus and Ma'aser Merkava, the advantage of Rav Shimon ben Nasanel's expounded the Ma'aser Merkava of Rabbi Loza ben Aroch over that which Rabbi Loza ben Aroch said is Zoich Mudgush in them. So that's also emphasizing the fact was Dafki B'Shasa that Pirkei of Ma'aser Merkava, that it's only when he started talking about the act of Merkava, Rosh Ha'aretz, the noise in the earth, Menira saw Hakeshes born, and then you see the bow in the cloud. But those going to nest, that was a miracle. Or this is going to Kufas Tammuz, it was the season of Tammuz. Over there, clouds aren't common. So, what is this whole thing about the cloud? This certainly requires explanation. The Gemara that sailed an ilu of Yeshua ben Levi. Gemara says about Rav Shimon Levi, greatness. As lo nira so keshes b'yom. I said Rav Shimon Yechoy. That's also but here the Gemara. It says about Rav Shimon Levi that lo nira so keshes b'yom. During his lifetime, there was never the bow in the. Why? What's so great about it? The bow is a effect, and it's a sign that the world will not get destroyed. So the fact that we have a great tzaddik in the generation don't need a noise. So basically, he was the ice. We didn't need a noise. So that means that not seeing the bow is an advantage. And what is the ilui? So we're saying a great thing here. That when he expounded in the acts of the Merkava, is nirsa keshes b'onon, and all of a sudden you do see the keshes b'onon. It seems to be a negative that you see the keshes. So why is the Gemara saying that? Because he was darshan Ma'aser Merkava, that's what we say. Is the beer in that? So explanation of this. But Negeya, there's two parts to the keshes. We could say here, Aleph, those are is bris. It becomes a covenant, a sign for a covenant. That's one aspect. Based of keshes state as there is as is a dover shu mukashli. Keshes means that it's equated to me. As is it's equated to Hashem. The far is the din. That's what the halacha is. As also leistaka b'keshes, you're not allowed to look at the keshes because the keshes is demelim. Because you are not careful, you're not protective of the honor of your Creator because you're looking at the keshes. And mainly, in addition, and mainly is gimel mufurish b'ma'aser merkava the be'askinam. It says very clearly in the act of the merkava, which is what we're discussing over here, that we're dashing about it. It says, "Kemare hakeshes asher yiyeh ba'onon gomer," just as the appearance of the bow that is in a cloud chulu, kein mare umare the muskvet Hashem. That's the image of Hashem. So we have this other aspect of the keshes which is a very holy and a great level. This is a Gilui Nailu for Shechina. This is a great elevated revelation of the Shechina, was bringt us as Alzayin der Keshes Ba'onon. That brings that there should be the bow and the honor. So when we're talking on a cloudy day and there's a Keshes, that's one aspect of the honor. But on a general basis, the Keshes, when it's not in a cloudy day, it's not, then it's a sign of Mukashli, of a high level. The rest from Keshes, the first aspect of Keshes is not even the Kumt, but Yom Iva comes on a cloudy day. In a Favolkuntik talk, cloudy day. Was the Anonim Weisner says, is that talk from the Kosher? The clouds show that it's a day of difficult judgment. Over the Anonim Keshes is coming. But when you have a cloud and the bow that comes, then was Medarshim Maisa Merkava through expounding in the act of Merkava. So the Nit an Oisef Shoylu Zain Dinim, they're not a sign that rejects judgment, they're blois a simon of Gilu Nailu Shechina. They're just at a great elevation or revelation of the Shechina. Is noch mehr verstandig. This would give even more understanding. But Rabbi Shimon ben Esanel is given to Nosei that he was in a way of Torah was his craft in an oif was it his did of the Shechina, it was a did of the Shechina. And because he was a did of the Shechina, he didn't do the Shema. And that's why he has to say, Evezor, B'kriyas Shema. And now the Rebbe is going to go to answer the last statement of the Mishnah, of the, we have a Alti Rosh B'fnei Atzmecha. So the Rebbe brings out that einer von den Yonim was eine Metargir, Dargose, Anailis, von Rav Shimon Yechoy. One of the aspects that describe the great level of Rav Shimon Yechoy is given Dovas Harad Gezok, is the fact that he stated, Yochel ani lifter as kola ilim kulam manadin. I have the ability to exempt all of the world from judgment. So what was the advantage and the greatness, the aspect of Rav Shimon Yechoy expressed itself? It's them was by him is given to that he had Torah as his craft. Is verstandig, so it's understood. As those was gekent pattern as kola ilum kulim and hadin. Why was he able to exempt everybody from judgment? Is verbunden mit dem Minyan for Torah Nasi. That's tied to the fact that Torah was his craft. So, Notamol Gered Barucha in the Maimon for Rav Shimon Yechoy once spoke that the state of Shimon Yochel and lifted as well kulim and adin. I can exempt the entire world from judgment. Das is nicht durch them, was hat gekent bei Wirkung der Anshe Deidoi Poil sein sollen Shuvatar. It's not through the fact that he can influence, that he meant I can accept them because I can influence them, the people of his generation, and going to cause them to do Tshuva. So it's not his chus, he's just going to work with the people. But what it means is not as Zion's chus is given as a grace, but rather that his merit was so great. As need kuchen dikev the avoinus from them there, notwithstanding the sins of the generation, is there sevel kol avenisayim or poiter menadin. He can tolerate. He's great, was so great that he can tolerate all their sins, and he can exempt them from judgment. Not because they're going to do tshuva, just that's how big and how great his chus was of Rav Shimon Yechoy. Bald as by Rav Shimon ben Esanel is given that Iluf and Toroso and Mnosy B'dugma to Rav Shimon Yechoy Kenal. Since Rav Shimon ben Esanel had the advantage Toroso and Mnosy, similar to Rav Shimon Yechoy, is euch sein Öfter in Welt given al derech also what he accomplished in the world was similar. The minyan was Rashbi had gesagt, it was also impacting the world, like Rashbi said, Yochel ani lifter as kol ha'olam kulim menadin. I can exempt the whole world from judgment. Abizeh, et euch werden verstandig, the shaykhs from the dritte in the Mishnah, to understand the third lesson in the Mishnah. Ba'alti rosh v'nei atzmecha. Don't be a Rasha in your own eyes to the Friedike Tzvei, to the previous mention. Davke mitzad them. It is specifically because with Rab Shimon ben Nesanel is given to Rosu Nosser. That was his craft. Wie Rab Shimon Yechoy. Rab Shimon Yechoy. Midosis werd ausgedrückt in the erste zwei Heroes, the Mishnah, as expressed in the two first instructions of the Mishnah. Was mitzad them is a Megan of sein daughter, Misegel Kol Nesem. That's why he protects for his generation and he tolerates all their sins. So now we need a caution from the Alti Rasha b'fnei atzmecha. Don't be a Rasha in your own eyes. Chlal, generally, is a zavas haltzich v'a Rasha. Person who holds himself a Rasha, we're telling him, don't hold yourself for a Rasha b'fnei atzmecha. Because generally, if a person holds himself a Rasha, so on his own, he's not going to search to do tshuva. So is then hoge as from Yoah and Yoseh lihudoi that the affliction, the poorness is good for the Yehudoi, basically that because they're not doing what Hashem wants, so they get as a breaktive mentioned so that the person gets punishment and pain, but zu brechen sein Metzies und bringen ihn zu Tshuva, they bring him to Tshuva. So we're talking about a person who's a Rasha. And a Rasha, if you hold a Rasha, then there's punishments over there. But over here, we're telling you, you're in the generation of Shimon Yechoy. You're in the generation of Shimon Nesanel. Was Zayin Schusut making even if he made the Peronis? He was protective of Peronis. The Farat Megidab and Yuchad Bavornen, they have to caution. Don't hold yourself a Rasha that because you're a Rasha and therefore you're going to get punishments. So wissen sein, as jeder kann und darf. Each one is able to and should. Und soif kesoif, weil jeder Menschen nidach. Then nobody will push away. Und wird Tshuva tun, do Tshuva. Und noch mehr, darf nicht ankommen zu Yisurim b'chol. Don't hold yourself a Rasha and don't think that there is Yisurim. Don't hold that. But I can Tshuva tun mit Echarchov Chaim Nuchov Shalva. Can do Tshuva being in a wide way in a life of relax and peace. And that's in the generation of Rav Shimon Nesanel. And that's why don't be a Rasha b'fnei atzmecha, because Rav Shimon Nesanel is going to be protecting them from the Yisurim, because Yicholni lifter kol ha'ilum kulam kol ha'ilum adin in his generation. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Ba'aloischa Shlach U'Bolok Tovshin Chavches.